Have you ever felt that strange sensation as the veil begins to thin? That peculiar moment when you start perceiving reality in a way that others around you simply cannot comprehend? There exists a profound truth at the heart of spiritual awakening that we rarely discuss openly because it carries such tremendous implications for our relationships, our sense of belonging, and our place in the social fabric. The truth is that genuine awakening creates a kind of existential solitude that inevitably separates you from the consensus reality that most of human society operates within. This is not because you choose isolation or because you develop some spiritual superiority complex. Rather, it happens organically as your perception shifts to see through the cultural programming, the social games, and the collective hypnosis that maintains the status quo of human consciousness. The ancient mystery schools understood this principle well. When an initiate crossed the threshold into deeper knowledge, they simultaneously stepped away from the common worldview that had previously connected them to others. This is why so many spiritual traditions throughout history have used the metaphor of death and rebirth. The death is not just symbolic, it represents the actual dissolution of the former self, the self that was constructed precisely to fit within and navigate the social matrix. This death must occur before the new consciousness can emerge. But what we rarely acknowledge is that this new consciousness may not find easy communion with those still embedded in conventional reality. Consider the chrysalis as it transforms into the butterfly. There is no halfway point where the creature is partly caterpillar and partly butterfly, maintaining relationships with other caterpillars while beginning to explore flight. The metamorphosis is complete and irreversible. The butterfly cannot return to crawling, cannot explain to the caterpillars what wings feel like, cannot translate the experience of flight into terms that make sense within the caterpillar world. This is not elitism. This is the nature of transformation. The butterfly does not look down on the caterpillars, it simply exists in a different reality, perceiving and experiencing dimensions that are literally invisible and incomprehensible from the caterpillar perspective. This creates a profound dilemma for anyone walking the path of awakening. As your consciousness expands, as you begin to see beyond the cultural constructs, beyond the conditioned patterns of thought, beyond the agreed-upon definitions of what constitutes reality, the very basis of your connection with others begins to dissolve. The shared assumptions, the common values, the mutual reinforcement of collective beliefs, all these connective tissues begin to atrophy as your perception shifts. You find yourself having conversations that seem to operate on entirely different levels. You speak words that sound like ordinary language, but carry meanings that others simply cannot access without having undergone similar transformations. The pain of this situation cannot be overstated. Humans are social creatures, wired for connection, belonging, and mutual understanding. When awakening creates a perceptual chasm between you and loved ones, the loneliness can feel absolutely devastating. You may find yourself sitting at family gatherings surrounded by people who have known you all your life, yet feeling more profoundly alone than if you were stranded on a deserted island. Because at least on the island, there would be no expectation of connection, no hope repeatedly raised and then dashed that someone might truly see you, hear you, comprehend the reality you now inhabit. I want to pause for a moment and ask you directly, when was the moment you first realized that your growing consciousness was creating distance between you and others in your life? That instant when you recognized that the more clearly you saw through the matrix of social constructs, the more difficult it became to engage in the everyday exchanges that most people consider normal and natural? I know this experience can be profoundly isolating. You look around at friends, family, colleagues, and you realize they are responding to a version of reality that you can no longer fully accept as complete or true. And perhaps the most painful part isn't their incomprehension, but the silence you must maintain to avoid being dismissed, pathologized, or worse yet, to prevent them from feeling judged or threatened by your evolving perspective. I want you to know that your experience matters, that your journey, even when solitary, is creating ripples in the field of consciousness that affect everyone around you, even if in imperceptible ways. And that's why I'd like to invite you to share a fragment of your experience in the comments below. You can simply copy this phrase and complete it. I realized my awakening was separating me from others when, by doing this, you not only validate your own experience, but you also extend a hand to someone else who might be watching this video feeling like they're the only one in the world going through this. Your comment might be exactly the confirmation someone needs to continue on their journey, to know they're not going crazy, that they're not alone. This silent community of awakened people spread throughout the world strengthens every time we recognize each other, like distant lights in the darkness, which when seen together form a constellation of expanded consciousness. Now let's continue our exploration of what happens when you begin to perceive layers of reality that remain invisible to most around you. the challenge grows even more complex, because awakening rarely happens all at once. It's not as though you take the red pill one morning and suddenly see through the entire matrix by lunchtime. Transformation tends to unfold gradually, with moments of sudden insight punctuating longer periods of integration. This means you often find yourself straddling multiple realities simultaneously. Part of you still operates within the conventional frameworks, understanding the rules of the social game, while another part sees these very same structures as arbitrary constructions with no inherent reality of their own. This creates a peculiar type of cognitive dissonance, where you may find yourself participating in conversations or activities that a part of you recognizes as based on shared illusions or limited perspectives. You might nod along to discussions about career advancement, political ideologies, or consumer choices while simultaneously perceiving the underlying patterns that make these concerns appear significant within the consensus reality. This isn't about feeling superior. In fact, it often comes with a deep compassion for how we all get caught in these webs of meaning that ultimately cause so much unnecessary suffering. Here we encounter one of the great paradoxes of awakening. The more you see through the illusions that bind human society together, the more difficult it becomes to engage authentically within that society. Yet at the same time, true awakening brings an expanded capacity for compassion and understanding. You see both the game and the players with greater clarity, recognizing that everyone is doing the best they can from their current level of awareness. This creates a profound tension within the awakening consciousness: how to honor your evolving perception while still connecting meaningfully with those who do not share this perception. Many people try to resolve this tension by compartmentalizing, by creating a spiritual identity that they express in certain contexts while maintaining a conventional self for family gatherings, work environments, and other social situations. But this strategy eventually becomes unsustainable. True awakening isn't something you do, it's something you become. It transforms how you perceive reality at a fundamental level. Pretending not to see what you see creates an internal friction that inevitably leads to psychological and even physical symptoms of distress. Others attempt to resolve the tension by seeking exclusively spiritual communities, surrounding themselves only with those on similar paths. While this approach can provide valuable support and validation, it often creates a different kind of echo chamber, a spiritual bubble that, ironically, can actually impede further growth. True awakening doesn't mean replacing one limited perspective with another, supposedly more spiritual one. It means developing the capacity to see through all perspectives, to recognize them as perspectives rather than absolute realities. The most challenging but ultimately most fruitful approach involves learning to navigate multiple realities simultaneously, developing a kind of perceptual fluidity that allows you to connect with people wherever they are in their journey, without compromising your own deepening awareness. This requires cultivating what we might call compassionate translation, the ability to express insights and understandings in language that can be received by different levels of consciousness, without diluting the essential truth of what you're communicating. This skill does not come easily. It demands both deep presence and tremendous flexibility. You must be fully attuned to the person before you, sensing where their edges of understanding lie, what metaphors might serve as bridges, what language will open rather than close their receptivity. You become like a translator between worlds, finding ways to honor both the expanded awareness you've accessed and the particular framework through which the other person currently perceives reality. What makes this especially difficult is that the most profound insights of awakening often reveal the limitations of language itself. The deeper dimensions of consciousness frequently cannot be captured in words at all. They can only be pointed to, hinted at, evoked through paradox or poetry or silence. This creates a fundamental challenge in communication, as the very medium of exchange words becomes recognized as inherently limited, even as we must continue to use it. Consider for a moment what happens when someone has a profound psychedelic experience that shatters their previous understanding of reality. Upon returning to ordinary consciousness, they often struggle to articulate what occurred. The experience feels ineffable beyond the capacity of language to capture or convey. Now imagine living in a permanently expanded state of awareness, continually perceiving dimensions of reality that simply cannot be translated into conventional terms. This is the predicament of the awakened consciousness trying to maintain connection with those still operating within the consensus reality. This predicament creates a profound loneliness that few discuss openly. There's almost a taboo against acknowledging this aspect of spiritual growth, perhaps because it seems to contradict the ideals of unity, and interconnection that are so central to many spiritual traditions. But authentic awakening requires absolute honesty. And the truth is that expanding consciousness often initially increases, rather than decreases, the sense of separation from others. This happens precisely because you begin to see how much of what passes for connection in ordinary human interaction is actually based on shared illusions, mutual validation of limited perspectives, and collective investment in maintaining certain comfortable falsehoods. The great spiritual teacher J. Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." Similarly, we might say that awakening inevitably creates a kind of misalignment with the prevailing social reality. This misalignment is not something to overcome or fix, it is an inherent aspect of seeing more clearly. When your perception expands beyond the consensus framework, you will inevitably find yourself at odds with many of the assumptions, values, and priorities that govern most human interaction. This can manifest in seemingly mundane ways. You might find yourself increasingly unable to engage in small talk, those surface exchanges that serve primarily to reinforce social bonds without requiring any depth of presence or authenticity. You might notice yourself withdrawing from activities that once seemed meaningful, but now appear as elaborate distractions from deeper currents of truth. You might find certain environments, particularly those saturated with unconscious collective energies, like shopping malls, corporate offices, or entertainment venues, increasingly difficult to tolerate. None of this makes you better than anyone else. In fact, one of the painful ironies of awakening is that even as your capacity for compassion expands, your ability to participate in ordinary social communion often contracts. You see the humanity in everyone more clearly than ever, yet find it harder to engage with that humanity through the conventional channels that society provides. This creates a peculiar type of suffering that is difficult to articulate to anyone who hasn't experienced it. The question then becomes, how do we navigate this territory with integrity and compassion, honoring both our expanding awareness and our continued need for human connection? How do we avoid the twin traps of either compromising our perception to fit in or isolating ourselves completely from those who don't share our perspective? There are no simple answers here, but certain approaches seem to offer greater possibility than others. First, and perhaps most importantly, we must release any expectation that others should see what we see or understand what we understand. True compassion recognizes that each person's consciousness unfolds in its own timing, according to its own inner wisdom. Trying to force awakening on others or feeling frustrated when they don't get it only creates more separation. Second, we can learn to find connection at levels deeper than conceptual agreement. Even when someone doesn't share our perception of reality, we can meet them in the field of presence, of open-hearted attention, of simple human care. This kind of connection transcends the need for shared beliefs or common perspectives. It meets in the space of being itself, which ultimately underlies all the various frameworks through which consciousness perceives reality. Third, we can develop community with others who are navigating similar terrain, not to create spiritual echo chambers, but to provide mirrors and support for our continued growth. The path of awakening was never meant to be walked entirely alone. Throughout history, those experiencing expanded states of consciousness have sought each other out, creating lineages, traditions, and communities that could hold and validate experiences beyond the consensus reality. Today, with our unprecedented global connectivity, finding such companions is easier than ever before, even as the challenge of authentic awakening remains as demanding as it always has been. And finally, perhaps most importantly, we can recognize that the very loneliness and separation we experience as our perception expands is itself part of the unfolding of greater wholeness. The seeming paradox is that we must often move through deeper experiences of separation in order to discover more authentic forms of connection. The caterpillar must surrender everything it knows, entering the darkness and solitude of the chrysalis, before it can emerge as the butterfly. Similarly, the awakening human must often pass through a dark night of isolation before discovering new ways of relating that honor both their expanded awareness and their inherent connection to all life. This understanding doesn't eliminate the pain of feeling separated from others by your awakening, but it does place that pain in a larger context, revealing it as not merely a personal problem to solve, but a necessary passage on the journey toward a more authentic way of being. The very experiences that seem to isolate you are actually initiating you into a more fundamental connectedness, one that doesn't depend on shared beliefs or common perspectives, but on the direct recognition of the consciousness that animates all beings. Trust this process. Trust that the very developments that seem to be pulling you away from others are actually preparing you for more authentic connection. Trust that the dissolution of old forms of relationship makes space for new possibilities of communion that you cannot yet imagine. What emerges on the other side of this transformation is much more beautiful, much more free, much more alive than what was lost. And remember that even in your moments of greatest aloneness, you are never truly alone. Across the world at this very moment, countless others are awakening, experiencing the same perceptual shifts, navigating the same challenging territory between worlds. Though you may rarely encounter them in your everyday life, they exist, holding space for the same expanded awareness that you are coming to embody. In your commitment to living truth as you perceive it, you strengthen their journey, just as their commitment strengthens yours. Together, though often invisible to each other, you form a network of awakened consciousness that is gradually transforming the collective field of human awareness. This transformation doesn't happen through proselytizing or conversion, but through the simple, powerful act of living from your deepest understanding, allowing your life to become a demonstration of the possibilities that open when consciousness begins to recognize its own nature more clearly. If these reflections on spiritual awakening and the solitude it sometimes creates have touched something within you, know that you are not alone on this journey. This path of consciousness expansion can seem isolating when those around you don't understand the transformations you're experiencing. It's precisely for this reason that we've created this safe space, this refuge for seekers like you. By subscribing to the channel, you become part of a silent community of people who, like you, are navigating between two worlds, the conventional and the expansive. Each new video we share is like a beacon in the fog, illuminating a bit more of the path ahead, offering new perspectives on how to integrate your mystical experiences into everyday life without losing your authenticity. We're not here to offer easy answers or empty promises of instant enlightenment. We're here to walk together, to explore the mysteries of consciousness with honesty and depth, to validate your experience when the world around you cannot understand it. If you feel you're growing in ways that others around you are not, if you perceive realities that go unnoticed by most, this channel is your sanctuary. Subscribe and allow yourself to be nourished by reflections that recognize both the beauty and the challenge of your awakening. Together, we form an invisible web of expanding consciousnesses, each at our own pace, but connected by authentic seeking. A simple click on the subscription button is a silent whisper that says, I too am on this path, I too am awakening. And that, in a world that often makes us feel alienated in our own expanded perception, is an invaluable treasure.